My name is Katya Boltanova. I live in Iowa City and I used to run a small seamstress business in Iowa City. I will show you how to sew on buttons today. First we'll thread a needle, then we will tie a knot, and then we will sew 3 different beautiful buttons. I thought I turned it off.
Okay, now it's recording.
Okay, one more time. 1, 2, 3. Recording?
Mm-hmm.
Hello, my name is Katya Boltanova. I suppose I should say that.
No, we'll just record that separately.
Oh, like record my face.
Okay, so just jump right into it.
Okay. Today I will show you how to thread a needle, make a knot, and sew on a few buttons. First, you will need a needle. And it's just any hand-sewn needle. Classic needle will work. Then you need thread. And for thread, you would need to cut off enough that it loops kind of twice onto your elbow. Any longer than that, and it's going to start tangling. So then I look into the needle's eye and put the thread through it and carefully pull it, and there you go. Then I have this perfectly threaded needle and 2 pieces of thread lined up here, and what I need is I need to put a knot here. The easiest and fastest way to put a knot at the end for sewing is to wrap it around the finger and roll it off. This is how you do it. I put it on my finger, put my thumb over it to hold it, then I wrap it around, and then I roll it off, and then I pull it with my fingernails. And I have this nice little knot. I'll do it one more time. I'll cut this one off. So again, 2 pieces of thread. I take it, wrap it around my finger, roll it off, and pull it. And again, that is my little knot. And I'll do it one more time. This one takes practice. Again, you can do it with just 1 thread also. That doesn't have to be 2. Wrap it around, just so, roll it off, and pull it. And there you go. And that one actually didn't turn out too well. If it's going to go through my fabric, if my fabric is too, the threads are too loose. So I'll redo this one. Again, wrap it, roll it, pull it. Not very good. The first 2 were perfect, but the second 2 weren't so good. So you just need to roll it enough times so it creates a nice little knot. Like this one is bigger, so it's going to stay better. Then I will take this piece of fabric. Usually this is similar to a shirt where your buttons will be sewn on. And for example, if you're repairing a button that just fell off your shirt, then you would locate where the button fell off and you will sew it on that particular place. Pay attention to how your button was sewn on, if it's this way or this way, and this is exactly that same direction that you will use to sew your button on. And make sure that you place it in the middle of the buttons, basically in exactly that same location where it came off from. Buttons can be different kinds. Some buttons have 2 holes, some buttons have 4 holes, and some buttons have a stem like this. And each of them will have different ways of sewing them on. The first 2 types will need an assistance of a little match or a toothpick. So I'll start with the easiest one. So let's say that this is where I need to sew it. I place Well, first I will, so this is my place where I need to sew it. And I sew one stitch. Then I place my match so that it goes between the two holes. Then I put it on behind, line it up so it's not twisted, so it's not falling off, so it's right in the correct place. And then I sew it through. And I can adjust. So I end up with this. This is my first stitch. Then I feel it, and I go like this to the front and to the back. And again to the front through the hole and to the back through the second hole. To the front and to the back, and to the front and to the back. And I will do it as many times as the thickness of my thread, the thickness of my fabric, and the thickness of my button requires. If my button is tiny and thin and the thread and the fabric are thin, then I will need not so many times. If I'm sewing a button on a coat, then I'll need a whole bunch of times. So for this particular button, this looks pretty good. It's nice and secure. Then I will put my needle under the button, but not through the hole to the front. And I will pull out my match. That match created a little bit of thread gap in there, which is going to be perfect for creating a stem. And we need the stem for buttons like this so that we can put a buttonhole over it, and it's not going to pull it out or rip it out, wear out your clothes too fast, so we don't lose it again, and it doesn't pucker and looks nice and nice. So then I will wrap it around a few times to create that stem so that the other layer of fabric can go under there without creating puckers. And then I will make a knot, but this knot is on the fabric, so I grab a little bit of, like a few threads of the fabric, and pull it through and tie it. And I will do it one more time, because buttons wear out. They use, we do a lot of pulling on them. They need to be really secure, so you can do it even a couple more times to secure it. And then I cut off my thread, and there is my button with the nice little stem. So that's one way of sewing a button, of this button. For the button with 4 holes, there are 2 ways of sewing them on. We can do parallel stitches, like on this button there is 2 holes, so we can do like that, and then parallel there would be another line, or we can do them crisscross. It doesn't matter too much if you're just sewing one button, but if you are sewing a whole bunch of buttons, then you need to basically decide if you're going to do them crisscross or if you're going to sew them parallel to each other, so that they all look the same. And if you're repairing something and your garment has 4 whole buttons on it already, basically look at how they're already sewn and use that same technique. So I'm going to thread my needle again. So I'll take enough to wrap around between my hand and my elbow. Don't need any more than that, otherwise it's going to start tangling and create more mess. I thread it, pull it, line them up, and make a knot. To make a knot, I wrap it around my finger, holding it with my thumb, and roll it off. And then I pull it with my fingernails to the end. So there's my knot. So for this button, I will go ahead and sew it parallel stitches. So as for the first button here, I will need to use a match to create that little stem so that when we button our shirt, there is enough place there, space for fabric, another layer or two of fabric to go under your button so that it doesn't pucker and doesn't pull out the fabric and doesn't rip it. So first I will locate exactly where my button belongs by measuring it. If you're repairing, or if I am making something new, then I will put marks at the specific locations at the same increments where I need my buttons to be. So let's say this button belongs over here. So I will take my needle and do a first stitch without a button. Then I will put my match and sew on. And actually it would be more fun, let's just do it crisscross, because parallel is basically like doing the first one we did, so there's nothing new in there. But for crisscross you would go across, connecting two holes, and then from the back you go to the front. And you need to hold the button really secure in the same place so that it doesn't shift, it doesn't move, it doesn't roll. You don't let it go. And you do a whole bunch of stitches. So this is 3. And from the back. And this is 4. 4 in one direction, that's enough. Then I will kind of feel it from the back where my other hole is, right, this one, where I haven't been yet, and I go crisscross over the initial stitches, and I find it and do the same number of stitches. So I did 4 and I'm doing 4 here as well, and one more. There you go. So I sewed on this button nice and secure. Then I will place my needle between the button and the front of the fabric, pull out my match like this, put my fabric nice and tight here and kind of lift the button, and I wrap around a bunch of times to create a little stem. And once I feel like it's nice and enough, then I will, maybe 3 or 4 times, then I will make a tiny little stitch and put the needle through my loop to create a knot, finishing knot. And for buttons I like to do it a couple of times so that it's nice and strong and doesn't come off. Maybe even 3 times. Let's do it 3 times. That way we never lose this button again. There. And I cut off my thread. And now what I have is a button on a little stem, and there are no knots. It's nice and clean on the back. And all of the knots are done under the button where it's nice hidden from the view. So this is the second type of button. All right, so now we have the third button, and this one already has a stem behind it. So sewing this one is going to be a little bit different from the first 2. So same way, we'll locate where it belongs and we will sew it on. And I'll show you again how to thread the needle. Repetition is always good, so I kind of measure the same amount as the length from my hand to my elbow. And that's more than enough for hand sewing. You don't want any longer because it's going to start tangling if it's longer than that. If it's shorter, it might be not enough for sewing on what you need to sew on. So I put it through the eye of the needle, line it up so it's the ends match, and then I will wrap it around my finger, roll it off, and pull it, and there is my knot. And if I don't like this little ends and the knot looks good, I just trim the ends so they don't stick out from behind my button. For this button, because it already has a stem, I don't need a match or toothpick to sew it on. So all I need is just needle and thread and the button itself. So let's say that this button belongs here. And again, if I'm replacing a button that just fell off in my garment, on shirt or somewhere, then I locate exact spot. And you will be able to tell where it belongs by finding little tiny holes where the threads went, where the button was before. If you lost those little holes or little thread is not there anymore, then basically you would take distance between the previous two buttons, between this button, and measure them and put that button in between them exactly. Or measure that distance. If you need to put several of them, then put them at the same distance with the ruler. And so let's say that this button will belong over here. So I will start by putting the first stitch without the button, like this. One of my threads, there you go. Then I will put my button on that location, put my needle through the button, and I will place it in such a way so that I can comfortably hold on to it while stitching it without having to move it. So I place it like this, and I'm catching the fabric and put it through the stem and through the opening. So that's my first stitch, and I have to be really careful from now on not to shift it and move it around so that I don't create more unnecessary stitches on the back, so that it doesn't look nice when there are stitches without an order. So all of the stitches are unified. And since this button is pretty big, so assuming that this button belongs to a coat or something that is heavy duty, so I will want to sew it a whole bunch of times. If I sew it just 3 or 4 little stitches, it's not enough for this big button. It might fall off. And the thread can wear out on this metal piece too, so I have to put a whole bunch more to make this one stay nice in place. Okay, so then I hold it down and I will put one little stitch on the side on the fabric without having to go through the button opening, and through this loop I put my thread, and I can do several of them like that. And I'll show you one more knot that's a lot stronger than what I just showed you here. So one more, a stronger knot would be when I put one little stitch and then I take the end of the thread that's left there and loop it around, wrap it around my needle like 3 or 4 times. 3 times usually is enough. And then I pull it through. And that creates a much stronger knot right there. And it's okay to put 2 or 3 or even 4 knots behind the button, because that's going to secure it much better. And you can place them in different locations too, because they're under the button anyway. No one is going to see them, but it's going to keep the button securely in place. Then I cut off my thread and I unfold straighten it out, and here is my back, and here is my button in place. So this is how you sew on different buttons. With 2 openings, 2 holes, 4 holes, crisscross. You can do them again, remember, parallel to each other, just like this. 2 of this kind of, or crisscross. And you can do 1 on the stem. Thank you for watching.